Charles's voice cut through the clamor of the kitchen, sharp and demanding like the edge of a cleaver. "Cynthia, bring me some tea now." I paused, my hands still submerged in soapy water. "Wait, I'm doing the dishes." His tone thickened with disbelief and impatience. "Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders?" Before I could reply, he interrupted. "What a useless wife you are." His words stung, but the next command came from Kelly, my mother-in-law, lounging in the living room with a slice of cake she'd pilfered from the fridge. "Make me some sweet coffee, please." Her eyes twinkled with mischievous delight, but it only deepened my frustration. I sighed, my gaze falling on the towering stack of dirty dishes. There were too many, but Kelly's demand left me no room to protest. "Leave them for later," she said dismissively, "just do what we say." Useless wife. Charles's words echoed in my mind, each one a lash against my spirit. I am Cynthia, 30 years old, a working mother, caught in a life that felt less like a home and more like a prison. My only solace was my 5-year-old son, who shone as a tiny beacon in an otherwise dim existence. We lived in Charles's parental home, an arrangement I had reluctantly agreed to, under the pretense of caring for Kelly after my father-in-law's death. At first, I sympathized with her grief, but it quickly became clear that I was nothing more than a pawn in her power struggle. No matter how hard I tried, cooking, cleaning, working, it was never enough. My efforts were met with scorn. "These sautéed vegetables and shrimp are so half-hearted," Kelly would sneer. "Cook it properly, from scratch." "I'm busy and can only make simple things," I'd explain, struggling to keep my composure. "That's why I hate back talk from a daughter-in-law," she'd snap. "Cook from scratch." Trapped in this unrelenting cycle of demands and criticism, I longed for a change, for the peace that always seemed out of reach. One day, I hesitated before asking, knowing the answer would be cold and dismissive. "So, you're a good cook, right?" Her response was frosty, sharp. "Why would I do housework when you're here?" Her words stung like a slap, and with them, the realization that I was truly nothing more than a servant in their eyes. Over time, they stopped acknowledging my presence altogether. I became a ghost in my own home, only noticed by my son, whose love was the only thing that kept me tethered to this place. 6 years passed under this oppressive cloud. My son was growing, but the atmosphere remained unchanged. Kelly, now 65, seemed to take a twisted pleasure in my misery. One evening, as I returned home from work, the weight of my reality finally sank in. I was invisible, my existence meaningless. I was a shadow in their lives, except for my son, whose recognition I cherished. The thought of losing even that was unbearable. I threw myself into cooking, hoping to stave off the creeping sadness. Sichuan chili chicken, crispy fish fillets, and beef and broccoli stir-fry. It was my attempt at normalcy, a glimmer of hope for a decent dinner, but Charles shattered the silence with a command. "Bring me the mayo," he ordered abruptly. I handed it to him, my frustration bubbling inside. His first words to me in days were not a thank you or even a conversation, but another order. It was the final straw. Then Kelly spoke up. "Clean the toilet, right now." I was stunned. "Yes, right now," she insisted, venom dripping from her words. Unable to contain my frustration any longer, I protested. "Don't say such things while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your heart." Her eyes narrowed, and the argument escalated quickly. Charles intervened, demanding an apology, but this time, I stood my ground. For the first time in years, I confronted them, and the conflict reached its boiling point. I knew, then, that I had to make a change, for my son and for my own well-being. That night, I retreated to my room, filled out divorce papers, and presented them to Charles. His face registered shock, but within me surged a quiet determination. "I'm filing these," I said, meeting his gaze with unwavering certainty. For the first time in years, I felt as though I had stepped out of the shadows and was finally ready to reclaim my life. In the days that followed, the household simmered with harsh glares and biting comments, but amid the tension, I experienced a strange sense of liberation. One evening, while serving dinner, Kelly scoffed at the meal. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I swallowed my frustration and focused on my son's beaming smile. "Eat up, sweetheart, I made your favorite tonight." Charles, ever the sarcastic one, chimed in. "Oh, now you're the perfect mother, huh? What a joke." Anger stirred inside me, but I held my composure, determined not to let their cruelty break me. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son," I said, trying to hold on to my composure. Kelly scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. Don't act like you're better than us. You're just a nuisance in this house. The tension at the dinner table was thick. As Charles continued to hurl insults, his words stung, but I stood my ground. So, Cynthia, have you thought about how you'll manage after the divorce? You can barely run a household, let alone take care of your own life, he sneered. I looked him in the eye, unshaken. I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself or our son. For a brief moment, his smirk faltered, and I saw a flicker of unease pass across his face. Before he could respond, Kelly interjected. Don't be ridiculous, she said sharply. You rely on us more than we rely on you. The conversation shifted, and for the first time, we ventured into the one topic they usually avoided: finances. You know, I said calmly, but firmly, without my paycheck, this household would be struggling. I'm done relying on you. I'm ready to start fresh and take care of what matters, our son. Kelly's dismissive laugh echoed in the room. We'll manage. We don't need your charity. But Charles remained silent, his discomfort palpable. His lack of response spoke louder than anything he could have said. Deep down, he knew I was right. The days that followed were filled with mounting tension. Kelly bounced between pretending to plead with me to stay and throwing insults when I held firm. Charles, however, retreated into himself, his usual arrogance crumbling under the weight of the reality he was financially dependent on me, and that was something he couldn't ignore. Then, one afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them that froze my blood. Leaving her is not an option, Charles hissed, his voice low and tight. We rely on her money. Kelly's response was chillingly cold and calculated. Don't worry, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable that she won't even think about leaving. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. They didn't care about me or our son. To them, we were nothing more than pawns in their game of control and financial manipulation. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of the situation settled heavily on me. A plan was beginning to form in my mind, a plan to fight back. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one. But this battle wouldn't be fought with words. I would hit them where it would hurt the most, their pride and their finances. The next morning, I took my first steps toward reclaiming my life. I set my plan into motion by reaching out to a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer. I want a divorce, I told her firmly, and I want to make sure they don't get more than they deserve. She nodded, her expression resolute. We'll make sure of that. You've been the primary provider, right? We'll use that. With each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I started documenting everything, the insults, the financial manipulation, and even the smallest grievances. It was time to make them accountable, to show them that their actions would have consequences. I was no longer just trying to survive. I was fighting back. This was about reclaiming my life and securing a better future for my son. As I collected the evidence, a newfound strength began to rise within me. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. The cloud of disrespect that had hung over me for so long was starting to lift, replaced by the promise of a fresh start. But as the divorce proceedings began, the tension at home only escalated. Despite that, I no longer feared their tactics. Each day, my determination solidified, and the doubts that once clouded my mind began to fade away. One evening, Kelly tried a different approach. Her voice oozed with false sweetness. Cynthia, dear, why don't we forget all this unpleasantness? You know we're family. I met her gaze, unwavering. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Charles, who had been quiet until then, scoffed dismissively. Oh, now you're the victim. You're not as innocent as you pretend. Despite the rising anger inside me, I kept my voice steady. I'm not pretending anything, Charles. I simply refuse to be your punching bag any longer. I knew the conversation would eventually turn to money, and sure enough, it did. You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him? Charles sneered. I answered with calm confidence. I've been supporting this family for years. I'll manage. Kelly sneered, her words dripping with contempt. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back, begging to return. Their words no longer had power over me. I had come to understand my worth, and I knew the truth of our situation. The following day, I met with my lawyer again, and she laid out our strategy with precision. We'll highlight their financial dependence on you, she said. That'll be key in the custody battle and asset division. I nodded, feeling a sense of validation and support. The legal system was on my side, and I was fully prepared to assert my rights. At home, tensions reached new heights. Kelly's attempts to belittle and intimidate me became more desperate. One evening, Her voice was laced with venom. "You think you're clever?" Standing tall, I didn't flinch. I had already seen their true colors, and I was ready to move on. Armed with evidence, legal support, and a renewed sense of self-worth, I faced Kelly's accusing glare. She spat, "But you're just abandoning your family." I looked her in the eye, my resolve unshaken. "No, I'm finally standing up for myself." Charles, his voice seething with anger, chimed in, "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." But his threats were hollow now. They no longer had power over me. I had moved beyond fear. As the court date drew closer, I prepared for the legal battle ahead. I organized financial records, documented their spiteful comments, and compiled evidence of their neglect. One quiet afternoon, as I sorted through my papers, my son came to me, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I pulled him into a tight, protective embrace. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new, happy life, just you and me." His arms tightened around me, and in that moment, I knew with complete certainty that I was doing the right thing. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my son's future. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, bringing with it a mix of dread and anticipation. I was ready to face Charles and Kelly, to finally break free from their control and manipulation, determined to reclaim my life. I was committed to securing the peace and happiness my son deserved. This day was about justice, and I was resolute in seeing it through. Sitting across from Charles and Kelly in the courtroom, a surreal mix of emotions washed over me. This was the moment of change, the end of their reign. As the proceedings began, Charles's lawyer painted him as a devoted husband and father, falsely accused, while Kelly cast herself as a grieving mother-in-law, wronged by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. But I was ready, armed with evidence and a newfound resolve. I was prepared to expose the truth and move forward. Their performances were transparent, their lies blatant. When it was my turn to speak, I did so with clarity and composure. For years, I've been the sole breadwinner in this family, while my husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulation have only worsened our struggles. Charles interrupted, feigning hurt. "Cynthia, how can you say such things?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "Support isn't about words, Charles, it's measured by actions, and yours have been nothing but selfish and cruel." The judge listened intently as I presented my case, financial records, audio recordings of their verbal attacks, and testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. Each piece of evidence chipped away at Charles's self-righteousness, and Kelly's calm facade crumbled, revealing her true nature. The room fell silent as my lawyer introduced the final blow, photographs and documents revealing Charles's infidelity, as well as Kelly's secret affair with a neighbor. "Jacob," gasps filled the air, and Charles's eyes widened in disbelief. Kelly's face twisted in fury. "You violated our privacy," she screamed. I met her glare without hesitation. "No, I merely uncovered the truth, a truth you both tried to hide for far too long." The judge called for order, but their credibility had been shattered. The damage was irreversible. The court's ruling came swiftly. I was awarded full custody of our son, and the assets were divided equitably. Charles and Kelly were left with nothing but their shattered reputations. As I left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The years of manipulation and mistreatment were finally over. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. This victory wasn't just for me, it was for my son's future, for a new life free from their shadow. The most triumphant moment came just outside the courthouse when my son ran to me, his face beaming with relief. "We did it, Ma," he exclaimed. "Yes, we did," I replied, pulling him into a tight embrace. "We're free now. This is just the beginning for us." As we walked away together, I felt an overwhelming sense of victory. This wasn't just a win for me, it was a win for anyone who has ever felt powerless. It was a victory for truth, for fairness, and it marked the start of a new chapter filled with hope and the promise of a better future. In the days that followed, news of Charles and Kelly's deceit spread quickly through our tight-knit community, tarnishing their reputations. They could no longer maintain their facade of respectability. I focused on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that Charles and Kelly were finally facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, as I prepared dinner, an unexpected visitor arrived at my door. Hannah, Jacob's wife. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Cynthia, I've heard everything. I can't believe what Kelly did." I invited her in, and over tea, she shared her heartbreak. I trusted her, as a neighbor, as a friend, to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened, offering comfort, realizing just how deeply Kelly's betrayal had reached. The next day, I crossed paths with Charles in town. He looked defeated, a shadow of the man he once was. His arrogance was gone. "What's left to say, Charles?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything," he murmured. His apology was weak, but it marked a shift. He finally recognized how much he had depended on me, how much he had taken for granted. But it was Kelly who bore the brunt of the fallout. Her affair with Jacob didn't just destroy her reputation, it led to serious legal trouble. Hannah filed for divorce and sued her for alienation of affection, adding a legal stain to Kelly's scandal. The whispers through our neighborhood painted a vivid picture of Kelly's downfall, of a woman undone by her own misdeeds. She became an outcast, shunned by the very people she had once considered her friends. One afternoon, I saw her at the grocery store. She moved quickly down the aisles, trying to avoid attention. Our paths crossed, and our eyes met. The resentment and defeat in her gaze were unmistakable. "You did this to me," she hissed as she passed. I watched her retreat, a complex mix of pity and vindication rising within me. "No, Kelly," I whispered to myself, "you did this to yourself." The tables had turned. The consequences of their actions were now unavoidable. Charles and Kelly were finally facing the repercussions of their years of deceit and manipulation. As I focused on my son and our fresh start, I realized that the greatest form of revenge was simply living well, free from the toxicity that had once overshadowed my life. This journey wasn't about vengeance, it was about freedom, breaking free from the cycles of abuse and control that had bound us. Looking ahead, I felt nothing but hope. This new chapter wasn't just a twist of fate, it was a well-earned beginning, full of possibilities and free from the shadows that once loomed so large.